Welcome to Mobile Forum's discussion about the blind spot in digital banking, where the authors of our latest report talk about emerging privacy-enhancing technologies and their role in privacy risk mitigation and business innovation. My name is Elina Mattila, and I'm the Executive Director at Mobile Forum. For those of you who are not familiar with us, Mobile Forum is a not-for-profit member-based industry association. We act as a knowledge and networking platform on new technologies and emerging business models in the digital financial services. Our members include banks such as HSBC, UBS, Nordea, Erste Bank, and many others, as well as small and large solution providers. We connect banking practitioners around the world who are navigating similar challenges in their organizations. And we provide a trusted environment for them to share practical behind-the-scenes information with each other. One of the ways we do this is through our expert groups. The Data Privacy Expert Group that is represented here today brings together people who are working on privacy or data-related topics in our member organization, and they come together to discuss the issues that they're trying to solve. So I will hand over now to the core team of the Data Privacy Expert Group. So welcome.
So we are really happy to host this and hope this will be interactive. So hoping for your comments in the chat too. So my background is I'm heading the productization for data and AI at Tietoevry. And there I'm responsible for, let's say, running explorations on the field of AI with multiple software products we have in multiple industries, among those especially financial services. And my role is to help these product teams in exploring opportunities around AI and data. So why I'm interested in collaborating in this expert group is the special, let's say, meeting point between AI and technologies and privacy aspects, because 80% of the cases, if it is banking or if it's public services that we look into, have something to do with personal data. And I see if we don't, let's say, have a clear compliance strategy, but also an infrastructure and techniques in place, we will have no exploration. So that's why it's a field of importance to us, and also a field of personal interest. I think that's the same for you, Amir, right?
Yes, thank you, Sebastian. I would also, for those who don't know me already from the Mobile Forum, Amir Tabakovic. I'm a co-chair of this group. I'm an independent advisor and lecturer in the areas of applied artificial intelligence and data privacy. I have a background in banking. I spent many years in banking, also as a member of the board of directors at Mobile Forum, where I'm still an honorary member. I had my first near-death experience of an innovative digital banking project exactly 10 years ago, when I was leading a digital project focusing on data monetization. And that's the kind of first time where I looked at privacy as something as an unnecessary burden that only extended my time to market of my digital product. And since then, I completely changed my position on privacy. Today, I'm trying to close the gap between innovation and privacy. And I also think that that innovation as itself is not important enough to put our kind of put our customers half naked in the rear window, in the presentation window. So this this report is kind of a contribution to this effort.
My name is Ville Sointu. I am the head of emerging technologies for Nordea Bank, and I'm also a member of the board of directors for Mobile Forum. Mobile Forum is running expert groups, and we are these expert groups, of course, one of them is the one we're talking about today. And we are trying to basically write down on paper our day-to-day experiences working with these topics, which today, of course, is about data privacy and privacy-enhancing technologies specifically. Again, my view into this topic is as the head of emerging technologies, I am working in a bank in a field where we need to cooperate a lot with other banks and other financial institutions. And more often than not, we need to solve the problem of data sharing in a compliant and privacy-preserving way. This is actually the exact dilemma we want to talk about in this paper as well, trying to find a way to explain how these fairly complicated new technologies can be used for secure data sharing between institutions without compromising on the privacy and compliance aspects of this data.
So we were talking about the ways how to start the discussion, and maybe the good way to start it is to talk about the title of our report. So digital banking blind spot, the title sounds pretty much as a clickbait. It kind of worked already because you're participating now in this LinkedIn call, so we managed to draw your attention to this subject. But the question is this alert, is this alarm justified? This phone call. So does banking industry has a privacy weak point? It's kind of an open question, and this is actually the question that we try to answer in this first report that we published. So when it comes to this question, there are different perspectives to answer this, and I can cover the first one. And this is the argument that what we see is that the industry itself often is not aware of the privacy risk. And this is not only the case when it comes to innovation, but also in the regular data usage. So what I experience personally when I talk to banking executives and even professionals who are specialized in privacy within banks, that sometimes there is confusion that starts with the terms like pseudonymization or anonymization, which are often used as synonyms, although they aren't. You have to read the paper to see what's the difference there. But this kind of confusion can cause a huge problem. There is a story, for example, last year, Yodlee, which is one of the largest US financial data brokers, they got in trouble because the document leaked that describes the process, how they anonymize data that they then sell across the market. And within the paper was basically stated that they are not anonymizing their data, but they are only pseudonymizing the data, which means that this data can be these customers can be re-identified. So that's kind of not a good story if you're in the business of selling data. So just kind of make sure that you know what you're doing when you're in this process. And then the other point when it comes to banks not being aware of their privacy risks is also that there are plenty of non-compliant processes within the banks. Often the banks don't realize that the processes are not compliant until something happens, and sometimes they're even they're aware of it, but those processes are considered as mission critical and they have no fix at the moment. So they're kind of continuing doing that. So that's kind of just the one perspective why we think that's the blind spot, but maybe my colleagues want to add something more to that.
Maybe I can try. So it's, as mentioned before, I'm working a lot with let's say, innovation and transformation of software products, and also kind of banking software. And this has a lot to do with maturity. And what we see is that lifting maturity in privacy topics is a key enabler for actually those teams doing something new. So when we go and look at what they're currently doing, then you see that there are a number of privacy technologies in use, but the use cases they're used to are often relatively simple. So creating kind of dummy test data for some modules or something like that. But even there, we see that the currently used methods often do not live up to the risk standards. So they're not really safe if you really want to base business on that or use them for personal data. Especially things like re-identification with reference data is become a huge problem, because if you have new use cases where you combine data sets, where you merge more data into one, let's say, analysis data set, then you have much more chances to re-identify lines, people that are part of those data sets. And the, let's say, often used methods we see are absolutely not suited for dealing with those type of problems. And then the other, let's say, class of problems we see that new use cases also setting really limits to the usability of traditional methods. So if you look at cases where you really want to apply machine learning, then you talk about usually high volumes of data, huge data sets. And you're talking about huge dimensionality. That means those data sets are complex. They have many dimensions. To doing anonymization with this type of data sets, with classical methods, it's just not suitable. And that's why we need to look for new methods that can deal with this.
And from a banking perspective, where I, of course, spend most of my days working, we have to understand that everything that the banks do is always about risk aversion, maintaining trust with our customers. And of course, data privacy is at the heart of this trust question as well. So we approach any type of scenario where we talk about data sharing, where we talk about using data in general. We were very careful when approaching those topics. So we, of course, are looking and using a lot of these technologies, these more traditional, conventional technologies that we list also in the paper, about pseudonymization, anonymization, encryption, access control. All of these things are in use, of course. And the difference between these emerging privacy-enhancing technologies and the conventional ones really is that the traditional ones are they're intuitive. It's easy to understand that you have a set of data that you need to protect. You have a you then limit access to it. You either encrypt it fully, and then if you need to access it, you decrypt it. If you pseudonymize, you remove any personally identifiable information from there and replace it with pseudonyms. In anonymization, you go a step further and do the obfuscation. All of these methods are effective and actually being used, of course, today also in combination of these emerging privacy-enhancing technologies. But what I also encounter in the day-to-day work is that since these emerging PETs are so sometimes counterintuitive in the way they work, they are difficult to understand how can they even work. We're going to talk a little bit later about what these technologies are, but it's not actually that far away from almost like magic if you think about that you're actually able to do analytics on completely encrypted data sets, for example. These are not intuitively understood, and that's why we saw the gap as well when we started writing this paper around the fact that there's very deep technical knowledge in a lot of these papers that have been issued around this space, and then there's high-level kind of consultant strategy papers, but not too much in between, where we also wanted to have be with this paper, kind of explaining the gap between the technology-driven approach and the strategic approach. And we hope that when we explain these in hopefully simple terms, these new type of technologies, we are now able to have a conversation about the actual value of these technologies and what they can do. Maybe start to close that blind spot in this space, especially in the banking space, where we are so risk averse around these topics. Now, as I said, we.
Oh.
Okay,
So,
there we go.
yeah.
You can hear me again, I guess. Good. So like I said, emerging pets are not a reference to the Stephen King book about Pet Cemetery. It's actually about the privacy enhancing technologies. And when we started talking about emerging PETs, the first thing that came up is that this topic is also covered in something called trusted computing or trusted execution environments. Now, this topic we kind of moved away from there, so we started more looking into software-based approaches into this data sharing problem, and because of that, we are kind of excluding the hardware type approaches, at least for this paper. We will see, of course, about the future. Now, we divided this area of emerging privacy-enhancing technologies into 3 areas. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is something we call encrypted analysis. So this is specifically represented in the paper with something called homomorphic encryption, which is a way to analyze data without actually decrypting it. So if the encryption as such, as a very efficient method of protecting data, always, if you use it in its purest form, means that if you decryption key. So for some reason, my computer decides to put on the mute automatically. Maybe it doesn't like what I'm saying, but I'll keep on unmuting as I go. So homomorphic encryption is about doing analytical operations or algorithmic operations on encrypted data without having the decryption key for that data. So you're able to share the data set in its encrypted form, and the entity that actually analyzes is able to arrive at a correct conclusion without ever seeing the underlying data. And this is when I talked about magic. I mean, that's pretty much how it sounds like. How can you create any type of analysis on the data sets if you don't know what it is? But again, this is what we seek to explain in the paper, or at least start to explain in the paper. Now, I will let Amir continue about the other categories that we mentioned in the paper.
Sure. Maybe making a step back. So what you see is actually that we made this, I would say, rather new structure of how to look at these emerging pets on the high level, focusing on encrypted analysis, anonymized computing, and high-dimensional anonymization. So in the second part of, we are now switching from encryption side, where we say how it would be a great idea not to decrypt data again in order to analyze them, and we say let's focus on anonymizing the process itself, the computing. So we are working with the real data, but we are making sure that within this process of processing the data, that the process itself is anonymous. And there are 2 methods, techniques that we are looking deeper into. I won't describe them in detail, but the one is secure multi-party computation. I'm sure you already heard about that. And the other is federated learning, where you basically kind of decentralize the learning process, machine learning process on the, let's say, there where the data lies. So that's the anonymized computing. And maybe Sebastian, do you want to say something about the data itself? What methods are there to anonymize the data themselves?
Yeah, sure. I mean, this is leaping back to actually also my initial, let's say, input on new requirements towards larger and more complex data sets. And the methods we have looked on here are especially suited to deal with large data sets. So the first one is differential privacy, which is a concept that mathematically ensures that based on the outcomes of the process, the differential input of an individual of the input data set cannot be identified. So it's just it is, Google is using this a lot already in other use cases, but it is at the end, you don't do something to the data, but you do something to how you mix up the data and how you combine it with each other to make sure that no individual can be re-identified based on the outcomes. The other one is a highly, I would say, statistical method. It's synthetic data, AI-generated synthetic data, where you try to, based on the statistical properties of your input data, like distribution of certain values, create a synthetic copy of your data that includes the same statistical properties, but that doesn't include the original re-identifiable viable values. So this is highly useful when you want to build larger data sets, for example, for exploration, for testing, for this type of use cases. So to build, for example, internal, just say, data ecosystems that you also internally can work and share more freely on. So it's a very interesting method.
Yeah, and I'm kind of already chatting with people, and maybe. Oh, now we lost Sebastian.
Did you?
No.
I can hear you now.
Okay, I didn't say anything, but I wanted to. One very cool thing I've seen in the work with you guys was when exploring all these methods. I mean, it's for us also a learning curve. Nobody has worked on all of those, but I think one of the most interesting parts here is that we also see that the real value is often generated when you combine them. And this is also an interesting point in the report. So make sure you read it, but it's very interesting how you can also combine these techniques to really get to a new level of privacy and enable a very new level of handling and using this data. So it's a very interesting read.
Yes, indeed. And I was chatting with Matt Coleman. I'm kind of following the comments in the LinkedIn Live. So Matt Coleman was asking, are there already some players that which are offering solutions like encrypted analysis? Maybe that's the good point to say. Well, short answer, yes. Mainly startups. Coming up with solutions that probably have to deal with some complexity that is around with homomorphic encryptions, that forces companies that want to use this technology to simplify the code behind it. So if you want to analyze something, just imagine creating a code for some very simple edge device. That's kind of the environment that you have to imagine if you want to run this kind of solution. So simplification is the key. But
I think the key, especially in homomorphic encryption, is that it's still quite early days. Like you said, Amir, you have to focus on quite simple functions for now. But the idea still works, so it's easy to see that it will scale in the future to more complex things, even though you might be a little bit limited today in terms of what type of operations you're able to do. So yes, early days, it's no coincidence that we call these emerging PETs instead of just conventional ones. But yeah, I think it's a very good thing to understand that you're not able to do complex Google type analytics on homomorphic encryption just quite yet.
A lot of things are happening right now in the same time. So in parallel, like so there are not only the software side of this kind of solution is improving, but also the hardware to support exactly this kind of operation. So it will be very interesting in the next few years how this technology will evolve. Yes, and I guess this is also maybe a good point to address some use cases, no? Because these emerging technologies are interesting, but it's always the question, so where is the use case? Why would banks need this kind of technologies? And I think that there are different use cases. My impression is that one of the top use cases right now is, for example, is cloud migration. which is on the top of the list of any major bank if they haven't moved to the cloud yet. This is something that they are planning to do to provide. So the question is how to get more flexibility, more processing power by reducing the costs. And already when it comes to testing the cloud solution, is the question is, with which kind of data are you going to test the client's cloud solution? Specific cloud application, maybe third-party cloud application of vendors, something that would extend your existing business case, and then you end up thinking of exactly these issues, how to get the data into cloud. So that's kind of the one take, one of the use cases which is kind of very popular, and where we see that when we start mentioning this kind of technology, there are many banks that kind of that start thinking loudly about privacy.
I mean, this cloud topic, to me, this is also by heart very close related to innovation, right? That's when we look at what options do banks have to start their innovation runs. It's build yourself, use platforms, use maybe external innovators. But for all of these cases, at some point, you need to figure out how you share the data with them. So even if you have an external, let's say, fintech company that is doing some use case pretty well, and you can facilitate this into your business process, you need to make sure you have data that you can test the solution, validate if it's any good, and then you need to have a concept in place to actually have this set into production. And the traditional pets are very limited, suited for this type of collaboration.
Yeah, and I think kind of touching actually both of what you just mentioned, I think in general, these multi-stakeholder ecosystems, especially in regulated space, like in banking, like I mentioned a couple of times before, without knowing whenever I was muted or not. But the whenever we are talking about doing analytics, creating AI solutions and enhancing your algorithms on different kinds of solutions that you still want to do in a bank, because you do need to automate, you do need to make things more efficient. So you need to use this data to be basically more competitive in the landscape. But at the same time, you are constrained by this, well, not only regulation, but all the risk controls related to handling of private data. So you are automatically kind of losing the battle already for the big techs. So basically, the kind of giants that basically have access to all sorts of data and are much less restricted in the way they do. And on top of that, of course, they have much more capacity because they are obviously huge. Now, how does a bank then, in a regulated environment with kind of hands tied behind our backs when it comes to using not having the scale in the ecosystem to actually use that data in an efficient way? So perhaps emerging PETs could be used to kind of combine forces in a much more efficient way on things like basically anything that is related to private data. One thing that comes to mind, of course, is something like teaching an OCR application for reading to different kinds of invoices, for example. Now, teaching these algorithms today is based only on the data that you are able to enter yourself into the system. What if we could actually combine forces without sharing any information about those invoices and enhance the algorithm in a joint way by using things like emerging PETs, but at the same time staying compliant? And I think it makes sense for players that are kind of focused on privacy, like banks, to join forces because that's the way you remain competitive and make sure your algorithms are up to speed.
I mean, Ville, another huge, I think, usage area for this type of scenarios is financial crime prevention, right? So what you see in fraud patterns or money laundering is getting more and more multi-bank scenarios, more and more complex. And if banks want to officially identify this type of patterns, you just needed to be able to share data and run shared analysis.
Yeah, it is an interesting dilemma that you're actually working in a space where collaboration is almost expected, but at the same time it's prohibited. Yeah. So finding this balance with these new technologies could be a way forward for sure. Good. Now, again, we've mentioned now several times these different kinds of emerging privacy enhancing technologies. If you actually had a chance to look at the paper, I think we ended up having around, was it 15 or 16 pages in the document. Actually, originally, the first version of this paper was close to 50 pages. So we actually decided to cut it in 2 parts. And that's actually what we wanted to mention here as well, is that the second part of this paper is coming out later this year, as we get a chance to finalize it and make sure it's up to speed, both visually and grammatically, hopefully, as well. And what we will have in there is really one of the first things that we will talk about in the second part of this paper series is a more deeper dive into these technologies. So we now, even in this LinkedIn Live, we've talked briefly on a high level on how these technologies work, but we wanted to give a more in-depth analysis of not too deep. We're not going to have any mathematical equations, I promise you that, but we will explain, hopefully in a clear way, how these technologies work, so that everybody's able to understand enough about these technologies and then go and research more if needed. And the reason why it was really 50 pages, that even a simple explanation of any of these technologies requires a fair amount of text. So we wanted to really spread this into two papers. Yeah. But that's not all we're going to talk about in the second part. So Sebastian, why don't you talk about what else we're going to have there?
Yeah, in the discussions, there popped up one area again and again that was trying to, of course, having the combination of concepts and business, and the combination, what brings that together are the use cases. So what we were really interested in, we're discussing, okay, what are the existing use cases, how are they covered, how do the new use cases look like, and what's the requirements of those? So what we will aim for in the next part is to provide a first overview on the categorization on use cases, and we will try a mapping of those methods towards the use cases. This has some novelty in it, and it has some kind of degrees of freedom around it, but we base it also on the live feedback of our members and the participants in the expert group. So I think this is highly value generating for everybody that joins that discussion, because it's not the report for us that's the main, I would say, deliverable. It's actually the discussions with the experts on the way. So this is also a little call for action. Everybody that wants to join that discussion is still, the door is wide open. So because especially around those use case discussions, this is highly interesting. But I think that's not all. Amir, is there something more?
Absolutely. So beside looking deeper into the different emerging pets and also mapping them to the use cases, what we discovered also discussing with people who kind of reviewed our report is that the banks are very interested in these hybrid approaches that were mentioned before. This is exactly so. My feeling is that you understand that we're talking about emerging. We call them emerging because they are still not all of those are very mature, and many of them have still some challenges to overcome. And in the meantime, one of the interesting ways of dealing with these emergency pets is you can combine them and use them together to extract even more value or to from your data, or to do things that actually shouldn't be possible. And we want to exactly start working on these scenarios and saying and discovering what is possible when you combine different emerging pets together. So before we close this call, I would maybe we can check if there are any questions in the comment line column. So what I see that Matt Coleman asked again, probably referring to different emerging pets. The question was about what particular data types are better suited to pets than others. So what we already found out, many of those emerging pets, they are focusing on mathematical operations. So it's kind of the clear, easy answer is that the numeric data type is the easiest to deal with. The categorical is also nowadays is not an issue. That's something that is also known how to kind of encode this in many analytical techniques, but the text can still be challenging, especially because of the complexity which is hidden in the text itself. So this is kind of the very short answer to that. Do you have any more questions? Maybe we can still give you a minute for some questions or comments. Now that we've fixed all the technical issues with the LinkedIn Live.
Don't worry, they will come back as soon as I start talking, I'm sure.
Good. If not, maybe we can round up and first of all ask you to let us know what you think about the paper itself. What we heard is that this is one of the graphics. This flowchart seems to be very kind of interesting for professionals dealing with different privacy problems itself, because we try to basically show where different emergency pet make most sense, and how do they compare with let's call them legacy pets. But to sum up this discussion, this fireside chat, we spent now 45 minutes discussing why privacy isn't only a regulatory constraint. So we have now acknowledged that the privacy is not only prevents great idea, it can be also opportunity. The privacy is also something that can be built in your product. So instead of complaining about the privacy and why some things don't work, I think it's in the personal interest of all of us closely related to Mobile Forum, who are used to use technology to overcome different challenges and develop great products with the customer in mind, is also to embrace this technological solutions and fix the problems that we have right now, because privacy is here to stay. Yeah. So thank you very much from my side. If you have any further questions, feel free to contact us via Mobile Forum. Also, if you're a Mobile Forum member and you would like to participate in our expert group, we are, as already described or already mentioned, we are now preparing the second report. Feel free to join us, and thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.